Greetings, IB artists. This is Miss A. I've been teaching the IBDP Visual Arts course for over 20 years, and on this channel I share tips and strategies that work for me and my students. In particular, I want to focus on the new course which we started teaching and learning this year and which will be assessed in 2027. So in this video, I want to go over the overview of the three components of the IBDP Visual Arts course for the standard level students. So the three main components for the standard level students are the Art Making Inquiries portfolio, which used to be the process portfolio. And then you have the connection study, which basically was the comparative study in the previous course. And then you have the resolved artworks, which was basically previously known as the exhibition. The weighting remains the same. So the two most important components are the portfolio, the Art Making Inquiries portfolio, and the resolved artworks. And the connection study, which used to be the comparative study, has stayed at 20%. Generally speaking, I feel that the IB is trying to minimize the compartmentalization that I never really liked. The three components seem too separate, and I think the students found it difficult to really make connections between the three, and specifically the comparative study, which I'll talk about a little bit more. It just felt a little bit like teaching grammar separately from the language, which is, it's just clumsy. I think now they have made the connection study a lot more relevant to the process of the student and their growth as an artist. Basically, the connections between the research and the art making are a lot more obviously and easily connected. So if we look at the three components, the first one is the Art Making Inquiries portfolio. This component has replaced the process portfolio component on the previous course. It is essentially the same. Students are providing evidence of the process that they have been engaged with throughout the 2 years. I think what is a little bit different this year is that there is a real emphasis on the line of inquiry. So this line of inquiry, I feel, is really asking the students to explain more explicitly what they are actually exploring. If you have watched my previous videos, you know that I feel that having a theme for students is a really good focal point. I think it helps them produce a coherent body of work, but it has to be done right. I think it needs to simply be a focal point that guides the students and helps them have more of a clear direction. So I feel that the main difference between the process portfolio and the Art Making Inquiries portfolio is that, again, the emphasis is on really explaining the tasks that the students set themselves. What is it that you're actually exploring in terms of concept, in terms of process, in terms of media exploration, and also explaining how they're going about this exploration. So it is about explaining the task that the student has set for themselves, but also how that exploration manifested itself in the process itself. And also, what were the outcomes in terms of the discoveries, the successes and failures, and then finally, how that informs the next step, right? So, Art Making Inquiries portfolio, what was the intention, the artistic intention for the work, how that actually was explored in the process part, and how that process is now going to inform the next task. I feel that it asks the students to be a little bit more specific about their process in terms of what they're trying to do, how they're doing it in detail, and then how that process is going to inform the next step or the next task. It is weighted exactly like the previous one, so this is 40%, which is really, really important. For the art making inquiries portfolio, also one of the changes is that they really want to have less text and more of a visual representation of the process. So in terms of requirements, it is still up to 15 screens. And again, there is more emphasis on the visual evidence as the text is limited to 3,000 words. And this, I think, again, has been a really good move because sometimes the students just get carried away with text. And I know that, especially as an examiner, I find that really overwhelming. I think it helps the students to include text that is a lot more focused, relevant, to the point, succinct. So it's all good. I think that's a very good move. So moving on to the connection study component, this weighs in at 20%, and I think it's important to emphasize the different weightings. In my opinion, it is not that it is less important, absolutely not. I think it provides a very good foundation for students in terms of learning from artists about their process, about their strategies of communication, and making connections with their own work, as in applying what they learn from the studied artists to their own work. I think this is a really good idea. And again, the emphasis on application, so making connections between the studied artists and their own work, which is really, to me, such an important foundation for students to build on, because it's overwhelming. If people kind of just start making art, I think that the research can only help them not only navigate, but really kind of help them with the lines of inquiry in terms of having strategies and a direction and basically examples of how artists go about making their work that they directly apply to their own process. I think that's a really, really important component. But it's important to know that this is 20%, which means that the most important components are, the art making is really the end goal of all the research, and making connections that are relevant and useful for your own art making. So what is required for the connection study is up to 10 screens, whereas the previous comparative study was up to 15 screens. Again, I think this is a lot better because I feel that for many students on this course, the comparative study used to be quite a comfort zone, and they really got carried away. They spent a lot of time on the research, and I feel that it really distracted from the actual art making part. So I think this is better. They have also limited the text to 2,500 words. Again, I think that was a really good move. I feel that, it is less about the research. It is much more about what are you learning and what are you applying and making connections with in your own work. So the third component is the resolved artworks, which used to be the exhibition. So in this course, the exhibition part of the resolved works component is not compulsory, it is optional. I will strongly push to keep the exhibition as part of this course, because I feel like not only does it give the students a real opportunity to curate their work, which is a requirement of the course, but it also is an important part of celebrating the students and their 2 years worth of work. It's an accomplishment that the school should be proud of, because I feel it somehow deprives the students from sharing their work with the school community. So the resolved artworks component is 40% of the mark. Again, it was the same with the exhibition component in the previous course. So one of the differences is that the limit of the curatorial rationale in the exhibition component of the previous course used to be up to 400 words. Now in the resolved artworks component of this course, it is up to 700 words. So that's actually an expansion. I feel that again, it gives an opportunity to the students to really explicitly discuss the process, the lines of inquiry that they have taken, as well as the connections that they're making to the studied artists. As before, it used to be 4 to 7 artworks. Now it is up to 5 images or video files that are up to 3 minutes long. And also students still need to submit a title, details of the media used, as well as the size. In many ways, the restructuring of this course does not really differ that much from the previous one. It's just that the emphasis falls slightly in different areas of each component. As I've said, the most dramatic difference I feel is that things work much more cohesively. The 3 components work well together. The connections are made. The learned strategies and ways of communication are applied to the actual process and making of art, which I have to say the top students on the previous course were already making. I feel that this course is simply being a little bit more transparent about what the expectations are. And again, what the expectations are is that students have a direction or a line of inquiry, so there is some purpose and focus in their process and what they're trying to achieve, but also the connections between the research that they're doing, the art making, and the process that they are engaged with, which ultimately results in the resolved artworks. I will be talking more about the details, the criteria, for example, on the assessment objectives of each component, but I feel like I need to keep my video short in order to just kind of, have bits of information that are just a little bit more, palatable, because they're not overwhelming. So I really, really hope that this has been useful and helpful. This is Miss A. Thank you so much for watching, and all the best.